The Killing of Wilse Brown by S.C. Turnbo. Just over the line in Cedar Creek Township in Marion County, Arkansas, is a little glade on top of a hill where an old trail leads over it from the lower end of Panther Bottom to Big Creek. Another trailway leads from the old Magnus Bottom across this path as mentioned. Now the two trails cross each other near where there's an old flat rock or a ledge, and when the war between the states began, a man by the name of Wilse Brown lived on the right bank of the river, just between the mouth of Trimble's Creek and Becca's Branch. In a year or more, Brown moved to Big Creek and lived on the Hugh Magnus land, now known as the Fately Place. Brown's wife was named Margaret, and her father's name was Al Corn. Now their oldest child was a girl, and they called her Betsy Ann, and their next oldest was a boy named John, who died soon after the close of the war. The next oldest child was a girl named Susan. Their baby was a boy, and they called him Willie. And while Wilse Brown was living on Big Creek, John Anderson, a brother of Archibald and Pugh C. Anderson, lived on the right bank of the opposite river of Panther Bottom. Now, after Brown had moved to Big Creek, he soon reached the conclusion that it was best for him to be on the south side of the river, and decided to move across where the Andersons lived. And one evening, while the river was past fording, he procured a small dugout canoe and went over to Mr. Anderson's for help to move, and Anderson agreed to assist him to move across the river. And they were both to cross the river on the following morning in a canoe at the mouth of the deep hollow that empties into the river just below Pine Hollow. Now it seems that a scouting party of Federals were watching for this appearance, and some of them were concealed behind a large rock that lay on the bank of the river just above the mouth of the hollow, and which was near the canoe landing. Now when the two men in the dugout had reached the shore from the right bank, the men lying in wait captured them. Now they were taken on surprise, and when the enemy ordered them to surrender, they could do nothing at once but give up. Now their captors conducted them to the top of the bluff, and on the glade where the trails crossed each other, they were rejoined the main force there, and they halted their prisoners and accused Brown of stealing 2 cows from Mr. Isaac Mahan, who lived on the Little North Fork, which the man stoutly denied. At this, one of his captors knocked him down with the breech the end of his gun. The blow was a severe one, but it was not hard enough to stun him. Mr. Brown's temper rose to a high pitch, and without regard to his helpless condition as a prisoner, he rose to his feet with a rock in his hand, and no doubt would have hurled it at the man who struck him. But before he had time to deal his assailant with a return of a knockdown blow, he was shot dead. As Brown fell to the ground, his left leg doubled under him. They left the body where it fell and went on with Anderson and sent him to Springfield, Missouri, where he died in prison. Just before Mr. Anderson's death, he contrived to smuggle a letter to his family which described how he and Brown was captured, and with the full details of the death of Wilse Brown. On the following day after Brown was shot down and killed, Miss Jemima Carebolt and her 2 daughters, Jane and Lucinda, and Brown's wife and her children found the dead body. Now it was evident that they would have to obtain assistance to convey the body to the place of burial, and some of the women notified Mr. Calvin Clark, who lived on Big Creek, and he came and brought a big ox sled and a yoke of cattle, and Mr. Clark and the women placed the dead body on the sled. Mr. Clark hauled it to the top of the bluff overlooking the part of the Joe Magnus Bottom where it was taken off the sled and carried down the old trailway to the upper end of the bottom, where they dug a shallow grave in a thicket, and the dead man was buried without a coffin in the same clothes he was slain in. They made several ineffectual efforts to straighten his left leg, but they were compelled to bury him with the leg doubled underneath him. Now many years after this, land was put into cultivation, and in the course of time the skeleton of a man was plowed up on the upper part of this bottom, which was no doubt the remains of Mr. Wilse Brown.